we are just 8 days from Election Day, but already nearly 60 million people have cast their ballots, including the President of the United States. Some voters are spending hours online for their chance to safely participate in the democratic process. Millions of others sent their votes in by mail. All this as the candidates make their final push to the shrinking electorate. President Trump has 3 appearances today in Pennsylvania, a state he won in 2016, but it is very much in play this year. Joe Biden has no public speeches planned for today, but will return to the trail tomorrow. This all comes under the backdrop of coronavirus cases spiking nationwide and the impending confirmation of Judge Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court this evening. Let's bring in Joel Payne now. He is a CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist. Joel, welcome. So there are just 8 days left until the voting stops. The president is barnstorming the country while Joe Biden is picking his spots and making targeted speeches. Which strategy at this point is more effective, do you think?
8 days. Say that out loud, Tanya. Look, I think I think this is all kind of results based, right? So look, if Joe Biden wins and wins by a relatively more kind of conservative approach to the last week and a half, he'll be lauded for that. He played it right. If he doesn't win, then people will play the results, just like they did with Hillary Clinton in 2016 when, the campaign that I was a part of, when we famously were not quite as president in Michigan or Wisconsin, we were criticized for that. So I think you have to factor that in. You have to understand that you're going to be held accountable that way. That said, I very much trust the people at the head of the Biden campaign, and obviously the people at the head of the Trump campaign. They know what their formula was for winning last time. So I think both apparatus have proven or have a sense of kind of the proven way to win. They both have a path to victory, and I think you're going to see both campaigns kind of play that out to a T.
Absolutely. All right. So, as you know, 5 members of Vice President Mike Pence's inner circle have tested positive for coronavirus, yet he does remain out on the campaign trail. He's also expected to attend Judge Amy Coney Barrett's swearing in tonight. The White House is saying that the vice president is an essential worker. But what has been the backlash about him being so active during this time?
I just think it's a mixed message, right? And let's not forget that Mike Pence, along with being the vice president and being a part of the Trump administration, is also the head of the coronavirus task force, right? And so he theoretically is the person that should be most bound to CDC guidelines and to the guidelines of the public health officials who've been entrusted in that Trump inner circle. So to have the vice president really flouting his own administration's public health considerations and best practices, I do think that's really problematic, and I think that's hard to explain. You package that together with what Mark Meadows said yesterday on some of the Sunday shows related to the White House has kind of moved out of, trying to stop the virus and is really about how to live with the virus. I do think that is a message that is going to be a challenge for the president and for his team down the stretch here. And I think that the central theme of this election throughout, really since Joe Biden became the presumptive Democratic nominee, is coronavirus at the center of everything. And the president and his team have done everything to keep coronavirus as the center of gravity issue that really does contextualize everything else in this election. Nothing's changed and nothing will change between now and Election Day.
All right, Joel, I want to talk about some of these battleground states because several states that went to the president in 2016 are now very much in play. The CBS News battleground tracker shows Biden with small leads in Florida and North Carolina, and Georgia tied. So how can either campaign attract the limited number of undecided voters left in those states, and how critical will turnout be in those states?
Turnout's a big deal. Also, I would pay attention to some of the kind of more local issues that become national. Kind of think when people start thinking about like the Iowa caucuses, right? A lot of people start talking about ethanol. In the last debate, there was talk about fracking that plays big in Pennsylvania. I would imagine issues of kind of socialism, right? And that kind of talk will play big in Florida. So I would look for either candidate and either campaign to use those kind of what I might call localized issues to elevate nationally and to really try to influence the electorate, particularly those undecided voters down the stretch in some of these key states. I think Biden obviously is well positioned. He's better positioned, frankly, than Hillary Clinton. I know a lot of people like to look at the poll comparison between 2016 and now and do a one-to-one comparison, but you really can't. Biden's over 50% in a lot of these places. The early voting numbers are really through the roof. And also, Donald Trump is the president. He was the challenger then. He's the president now. It's a different race just by that fact alone.
So, Joel, the president once again floated the idea that he may not accept the election results once they come in, claiming again without proof that there's election fraud. How is that particular narrative playing with undecided voters?
Well, it's just a strategy, it seems like, from the president to suppress, and I mean that in a less caustic sense, right, to suppress excitement and enthusiasm for those who would hope to vote against him, but also it kind of combines with some of the more systemic efforts that Trump and the Republicans have taken to make it harder to vote. And again, that's not really a partisan issue. That's just an issue of fact. They, want less ballot boxes, rather less drop-off boxes in places like Texas, where in Harris County, the biggest county in the country, right? You have one ballot box, or rather one drop-off ballot box for early voting, things like that. That is a stock Republican position as opposed to being a position of the Democratic Party. And I do think you have to take that into account when you look at which side believes in, how we should view kind of the entire specter of voting and voting access. So I do think that's important. I think what the president has really tried to do is try to lay out some arguments ahead of time so that if the results don't come his way on election day, that there are natural arguments that he can pick up on and that he can kind of create talk tracks for his allies, people in key states, people up and down the ballot, and people in his orbit to be supportive of him. We'll have to see how that plays out, but I think that's what the president and his team have probably been trying to lay the groundwork for.
All right. Like you said, see how it plays out. We have 8 days. Joel Payne, thank you so much for joining us.